So I want to discuss in this video about having 6 and 9 in your Enneagram trifix and how that can manifest and how that can show up and what that means. So um, Enneagram 6 and 9 are sometimes there's certain elements of 6 and 9 that seem related because there's that line. If you know about the Enneagram, 6 can go to 9 and 9 can go to 6. They have that kind of psychological and almost like energetic connection, right? So Enneagram 6 is the central anxiety type, just driven by anxiety, driven by fear, essentially. And 9 is the central um, anger type, right? So 9 is sort of out of touch with certain elements of their own anger, while they can be very viscerally angry as well, but they can have a hard time sort of tapping into that at times. And 6 um, is driven by a lot by anxiety, even if it's not super obvious in every situation. Like it's not that they're necessarily going around sort of being scared all the time, but it's that um, awareness around having how much anxiety and fear you really have that can really uh, assist you in waking up, if that makes sense. So I didn't realize that I had like this underlying anxiety that drives the show and a lot of my decisions, um, until I realized that I was a 6. I'm a 6 core. So my trifix is 694, um, in that order, if you care about order, how the numbers are ordered, right? So um, I think having both 6 and 9 in the trifix, it's like, for me, 6 is driving the show. So it's the anxiety and the sort of fear and projection that is really running the show. And I thought I was a core 9 for a while, and I thought it was a core 4 for a while. And it's interesting that with 6s, a lot of the times they do find themselves more initially in the other two types in their trifix rather than the 6, because it's almost like a 6 doesn't, want to be a 6. A 6 doesn't want to be a 6. And I think no matter what your Enneagram type is, like, you're not really going to want to be your type, if that makes sense, because it's showing you the garbage, it's showing you the darkness of yourself, it's showing you the stuff that is like viscerally and instinctually driving you in ways that you don't want it to drive you, but it is driving you, right? So it doesn't mean that you're always unhappy because you're a certain type. you know if I'm a 6, I'm not always going around super anxious, fearful, but it's like my personality structure is programmed in that way. It has a lot to do with my personality programming that took place when I was very little, if that makes sense. Um, so 694 in my case. I specifically want to talk about the 6 and 9. So I think one thing is that 6s have a hard time landing. What that means is that, well, what I want to talk about is that 6 and 9 can both sort of ramble and not seem to sort of firmly land on a particular piece of information that they're trying to convey, for example, which is something that I often find myself doing even when I'm making these videos, um, when I'm talking to people. It's kind of like getting off track almost in a way, and or not landing specifically. Now with the 6, it's because it's the person has a hard time landing on specific topics or specific pieces of information because of its uncertainty. 6 is unsure. It's not certain about what it wants. Like it's there's some kind of, whatever way that is taking shape. It has some kind of uncertainty and it's unsure about what it wants to convey. For example, it has a hard time making decisions. It has a hard time landing on something specific because it sees different viewpoints, and it a lot of the times also people with 6 in the trifix or core 6s, they will want to bring to light something. I've seen myself do this. I've experienced myself doing this. Is that you're trying to bring to light something that hasn't been brought to light. So if people are talking, sometimes you want to sort of talk about what is not being said. And with the 9, I think I was trying to think about why the 9 gets off track. And while I have done a lot of reading about the Enneagram, I still don't fully understand why the nine gets sidetracked, but it's on the surface at least, it's this kind of haziness that the nine has, right? The nine is kind of has a hard time um accepting that they're like a separate entity. So nine wants to kind of merge, right? And so it kind of sees different patterns and different connections because it sees everything as like this whole picture. And me, even though I'm not a core nine, I have nine in the trifix. I also can very much understand and relate to this idea of, things are connected and seeing different things going together in a pattern almost. And so I think that's why the nine would have a hard time, or people with nine in the trifix, why they would have a hard time landing on a specific thing to talk about, for example, and why they might ramble is because it's like this diffusion. So it's like you're seeing all these dots in the air and you're connecting them all, but you're not necessarily landing on a specific thing to talk about, or like it's not the six's uncertainty, but it's just the nine's vision, holistic vision, that it sees everything and everything is connected, right? So it's hard to be black and white about things. It's hard to be definite about things. I would say that. Another thing I find interesting about having both six and nine in the trifix is that because six is such an anxious type, it seems almost unbelievable that you could also have nine in the trifix. So how does that work? In my case, I feel it on a very personal level. So while I know and I've become more aware of it over the years that I've learned the Enneagram, I know that I have this inner anxiety. Um, and it's this kind of anxiety that also gets externalized in kind of outbursts every once in a while, right? So I might project something that normally I would not think in these ways, but every once in a while I would project something very like um, definite and like black and white on people, if that makes sense. Kind of like um, no, it's this because of this, something like that. And normally I wouldn't think of that in those terms because of my nine fix as well. Like I would see different, holistic viewpoints. But every once in a while I go very sort of, it's this or this. So that's the six. But I find it interesting that like having both six and nine in the trifix, six is such an anxious type that anxiety is kind of elevated, or there's there's a way that the six has like it's almost like the nervous system is heightened, and really it's there so that you can spot dangers, for example, right? So the flight, fright, and freeze response is very much sort of always waiting to get activated, if that makes sense. Like it's always there in the picture. And nine is very sort of like a nine can be complacent, just really chill or complacent, um, and is like, I think with having six and nine, for example, why I would be a core six, not a core nine, I realized partly is because while people tell me that I'm easygoing and I may seem calm on the outside, it's like that is not driving the show. So the six is driving the show. Yes, the nine is there. So I can be much calmer than some other sixes. I can, seem very peaceful, easygoing, and I definitely have a need for kind of peace and kind of leave me alone kind of thing, like which is the nine's domain, kind of like I want to be left alone sometimes, in a very like visceral way. But that is not what is driving the show, because when I notice how I really am in the moment, like throughout my in moments throughout my life, it's really the six that is driving the show. Because even when I'm peaceful and easygoing, when I'm having a really relaxed moment, there will come a time. There more often comes a time when I am anxious, or something is always I'm looking to figure something out, like intellectually. So I'm not a body type in the core. I'm not a nine in the core, but I have nine. I have a strong nine, but it's like that is not what is constantly running the show, if that makes sense. Yes, it's always a part of me. We can't separate from our uh, trifix, really, but it is not what is at play actively the most, if that makes sense. So I think if you have six and nine in the trifix, no matter what order they're in, you have this interesting mix of being peaceful chill, easygoing, and you want that. You want peace. You want harmony. But you also have this anxiety. You also have this need to figure things out and not trusting your gut. So the nine can actually have times where it very much trusts its own gut, because nine is a gut type. When a nine is doing pretty well, they can actually really trust their instincts. They see the different viewpoints, but they know like what feels right to them. If they're not doing so well, they have a hard time knowing what they want, and sixes have a hard time landing on what they want or accepting, like a decision, if that makes sense. That they have to make a firm decision. So I think it's an interesting mix of things, because sixes are looking for that certainty on some level, and nines are looking for peace. And so sixes are kind of running around in their heads or things like that, and nines are kind of doing the opposite. Nines actually, like, if you have a 6 and 9 in your trifix, you are likely to be a core 6 rather than a core 9 if you are thinking constantly, not constantly, but like you have like this underlying anxiety that drives you to think more than a 9 would, and a core 9 would. So a core 9 will be more peaceful, or just will be more, there's more of a visceral, just kind of visceral sort of hidden anger energy about leave me alone, but it's not so much in the head, if that makes sense. And if you're doing both, then you most likely have 6 and 9 in the trifix. But I think figuring out which order they are, um, it can be difficult. But like if you're more about sort of being at peace and wanting to be left alone, interested in like harmonizing concepts, interested in harmony in general, synthesizing concepts, seeing different viewpoints, and but not letting yourself necessarily get like anxious about that, then you're more likely a core 9. But you're more likely a core 6 if you're um even thinking about how you're peaceful, for example. So if I'm having, like, I'm a 694, so if I'm having a peaceful period of time, which I do have that, but I will still think about it. I would be like, wow, I'm feeling so peaceful. But I feel like a 9 core would actually just lean into it fully and not really intellectualize it. Not saying that nines can't be intellectual, because they can be, especially nine wing one is a very sort of philosophical um, type. Nine wing eight is a bit more visceral, a bit more maybe less wordy. So I have nine wing one in the trifix. So I'm a 6 wing 7 core, then nine wing one, then 4 wing 3. And so nine wing one is the part of me that is, and maybe I'm going off track. I do that, 694. But nine wing one is the part of me that is um philosophizing and like psychologically, like finding psychological links between things, talking about psychology. Like that is kind of and then the thing, but like that is mixed with 6, which is just trying to find answers and trying to find, is asking questions, trying to find answers. So when you mix 6 and 9, it's like this mix of wanting to ask questions and find answers. And also, if you have 9 1, for example, then it's this kind of um like philosophy and like higher thinking. 9 8 is a bit more visceral, and maybe more sort of just less wordy, maybe a bit less philosophical. I'm not really sure, but to me it seems that way. So I think I rambled a lot in this video, but I think my main points really are that 6 and 9, 6 is anxious, 9 is peaceful, and it's like, which one of those do you have more? That will be higher up in um your trifix. So if you feel like you are, even in your peaceful moments, you're still kind of thinking, you're still kind of trying to like find mm, answers, then it's like you're more likely to be a 6. And this can show up in different ways, and depending on also instincts and things like that as well. But I just think like it's interesting to have 6 and 9, because what they do have in common as well is that, like I said, they can both be a little bit indecisive in some ways, but it comes from different places. So yeah, 6 is like anxious, trying to find like an intellectual safety net almost, and 9 is trying to find like um, a safety net in peace and tranquility, and sort of like, I can seem very easygoing and I can feel very relaxed, but my main focus, what is kind of driving the show most of the time, would be the 6, which is kind of trying to find answers and intellectualizing. um, I rambled so much, I think, but I do want to make more videos here, and if I have any more thoughts about anything to do with the Enneagram that I'd like to flesh out, I will most certainly do that. If you want more from me, please do subscribe and leave a thumbs up if you enjoyed this. And I do like reading people's experiences. So if you have any experiences about, having 6 and 9 in your trifix or something like that, leave a comment. Thank you so much.